My name is Allison Felis, and this is I'll Follow You, a podcast featuring light and lively conversations about film, music, and creative culture, coming to you from the People's Republic of Rogers Park on the far northeast side of Chicago. Today, I'm truly delighted to be in conversation with musician, actor, and translator Tim Clarke. As an actor, Tim has performed throughout Europe, North America, and the UK, including close to 1,000 appearances on London's West End stages. He's had leading roles in productions including Jesus Christ Superstar, Blood Brothers, The Buddy Holly Story, Dusty the Musical, The Glenn Miller Story, and The Demon Headmaster. Tim's television roles have included Sir Richard Byngham in The Spanish Armada, fireman Mick Foster in Emmerdale, and Detective Inspector Goodman in Canary Wharf, as well as numerous TV commercials. As a musician, he's written and recorded the albums Life Changes and To Love and Be Loved, and was the winner of the Netherlands International Song Festival and a finalist at the Isle of Wight Song Festival. A highly competent German and French speaker, Tim has also translated into English the German musicals A Touch of Color and Scrooge, A Christmas Tale, as well as project managed the critically acclaimed music theater piece In May, which features all original music by Neil Hannon of the Divine Comedy, which is what brought us together. In the spring of 2017, I wrote a long, loving post on my blog, Queen of Peaches, about the recording of In May that appeared as a bonus disc on the 2016 Divine Comedy album Foreverland. In the years since, it's become one of the most highly trafficked pieces on my site. Fans of Neil Hannon are nothing if not devoted to his music. Tim himself found and read the piece and reached out to me about it, and the rest, as you'll soon hear, is history. I was so excited that he was willing to spend a solid 90 minutes talking me through the ins and outs of his extremely varied career, as well as the creation of this breathtaking set of songs, which have meant so much to me over the past few years. And now, my conversation with Tim Clarke. Well, Tim Clarke, I am so excited to have you on the podcast with me here today. We've been chatting a little bit, but to get us kicked off into the real recording, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Alison. It's a real pleasure and an honor for me to be here. I'm very grateful and humbled and looking forward to a nice chat with you.
Well, I appreciate your time and your willingness, and I'm thrilled to talk to you, and I want to hear all about everything. So, I mean, the thing the thing that brought us together, of course, was In May, the delightful musical piece with music by Neil Hannon of the Divine Comedy, and your involvement as the translator with that. But then you also, I've come to find out, have this amazingly varied career as a translator and a performer and a musician and songwriter and everything else. So if you'd like to just give a little introduction to who you are and what you do for my listeners.
Well, yes. As I said earlier, I'm quite old now, Alison, so I seem to have accumulated a number of hats over the years, some of them more deliberate than others, I think. I did start off coming from a very musical family back in the day. My mother was a frustrated concert pianist, and we used to fall asleep at night listening to her. Well, she had 4 sons, and when we were all tucked up in bed, we'd sort of fall asleep listening to her playing Rachmaninoff and Grieg and Debussy and Chopin on the piano. So we didn't really know what a great sort of oral or aural education we were getting without even realizing it with mother. So, she sort of insisted that we all played musical instruments. So, I started on the clarinet when I was about 10. And then we had a band with my brothers. There was a sort of old drum kit lying around. So I started playing the drums in the band. And then doing school plays, etc., etc. So it's a very long-winded way of saying that I was always involved in the arts, music and theatre. It was just part of my life. And yeah, so after I'll skip forward a few years, I did a music and drama degree at university, and then started auditioning for jobs, if you like. And back in those days in the UK, you could only go up for a professional job if you had what they call an equity card. Now, equity is the actors' union. So they had, for beginners, they had the provisional equity card, and that would take you into your full professional equity card. So one of the ways of getting your equity card, or your provisional equity card, was the way I did it was through what they call variety, which is like cabaret, playing in working men's clubs, hotels, bars. I was singing and playing my clarinet and sax, doing sort of American numbers, the Great American Songbook and Summertime and stuff like that, which was great. And I gradually you had to have 10 contracts. Now, one gig in a hotel or a club was one contract. So I gradually got those 10 contracts together, and I applied then for my provisional equity card, which I got, and was then able to apply for sort of theatre jobs, which is where I really wanted to be. So yeah, I would just go down to London. I was living up in the north of England at the time, so that's how it started, going down on the train to audition in London, which was quite hard work, because it was more often than not ended in failure. And it cost me a lot of money on the train.
Yeah, I was going to say, a lot of time too.
Yeah, time and money. And but eventually I got a job in the show Jesus Christ Superstar. I got a nice part in that. It was the touring production of that, and that sort of set me on my way then. So the next big job I had after that, I was able to combine my instrumental skills with my acting skills, if you like. I did the Buddy Holly story, which again, a big show, and I had to play saxophone in the on-stage band, as well as playing the part of Buddy Holly's manager, Norman Petty. I had a nice acting role as well.
Wow, no pressure to play on stage and then also be acting. That's fantastic.
Well, it was an actor-musician show, and my sort of entry into the professional performing world coincided with the growth in actor-musician productions. I was
going to say, it seemed like there was a trend for that, like in the past couple of decades, where there's more and more of people playing on stage. Yeah,
that's right, and it continues to this day. So, sort of fast forwarding to 2018 was my last big show. I did the West End of London for 3 months in a production of the Glenn Miller story, which was fantastic. Again, I had a nice acting part, but I also played clarinet and alto sax in the 16-piece on-stage big band, which was absolutely fantastic, all the Glenn Miller music. So being in the West End, doing a show with music that I loved was a really great thrill. And we got paid rather nicely as well, which hasn't always been the case. Just sort of, you might wonder where the translation came from, my other hats. I lived in Germany from the age of 18 to 21 before I went to university. I didn't really know what I wanted to do after I'd finished high school. I knew it was something in the arts, but I wasn't quite sure how to get into it. So a friend of mine said, look, I'll get you a job in France in a summer school, teaching into summer school, which I did. I went to France for 6 months. I was 18 years old at this point. And then my brother, who lived in Germany, he said, come to Germany and I'll get you a job, and you'll earn some money and it's good fun. So I ended up in Bremen in the north of Germany. And unknown to me that where I was working at the time, it was in a landscape gardening firm, surprisingly. I had no experience as a landscape gardener, but I got a job digging holes and planting rhododendrons. But the boss was a great big music fan, particularly blues, 12-bar blues. And every Friday night was music night at his house. So he invited me along, this sort of callow, homesick young man, as I was, not speaking any German. And I started playing the drums on a Friday night at his house, and then started singing a bit and made contacts that way. And I still have friends now from that time. And so gradually my German improved, and after 3 years my German was very good. And so I was a sort of landscape gardener by day and a rock and roller by night.
The Beatles could never.
Oh, if only. Well, yeah. So it was wonderful lifestyle. But I think when I was 21, then I decided, it's time to really consolidate my skills, and that's when I did my music and drama degree. So I've kept up my German skills since then, and in fact, I was asked to do the Buddy Holly story in Germany, in Hamburg, in 1995. So I spent a year on stage acting in the German language and doing the same thing that I'd done in the English version of the Buddy Holly story. I played saxophone in the Buddy Holly band and played the part of his manager, but in German this time. Not
That's so cool.
Well, it was amazing. It really was. I have to, I've been very lucky in that. I mean, I'm telling you the good bits. I mean, you forget, as you know yourself, as a sort of artist yourself, you'll find that there are times when there's no money coming in and it's hard, and you have to dig in deep and try and make things happen. So so those are my hats, really, the translating. And to bring that up to speed, the translation this year has been an absolute godsend because of the pandemic. I did some free work for a producer in Berlin back in the summer of 2018, a very nice lady I've known for many years. And I helped her on a script. The script that she had at the time had been translated by an American into English, and there were some references that didn't quite work for an English audience. So I went to a rehearsed reading of the play in the West End in London and said to her, I think there are some references here that can be anglicised, made better for an English audience. Do you want me to have a go? And she said, yeah, that's fine. I'd be grateful. So I did that for her. And then that was the end of that. But then a few months later, she rang me. Well, it was January last year, and said, look, I've got this new musical, a really great show, which I'll tell you about. But we want it translating into English. Will you do it? Will you take it on? So I did. And that was amazing because the composer lives in Vienna, and I had a week in Vienna with him just before lockdown. We were going through finalising the script and sort of working on the lyrics, making sure everything was okay. So, and it was due to open, the German version of this show was due to open on the 9th of April in Berlin for a 6-week run. And then, anyway, on the back of that, this producer, a very nice lady in Berlin, as I say, she has been kind enough to give me 4 more theatre translations to do this year.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm currently sort of halfway through the final one. And it takes about 2 months to do each one. And and I get paid, and it's nice work. I sit at home here at my desk, and she sends the music through, the piano vocal score, the script, obviously in German, and I sort of immerse myself in. I watch it through or listen to it through several times, and then sort of start make a start on translating it. So it's been an absolute godsend this year, financially, creatively, and spiritually.
Yeah, just being able to stay connected to something artistic when you can't be on
absolutely.
stage. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, that's it. Staying connected, and it's a funny old business. I'd never have thought that all those years ago, when I was struggling to speak German as a young man working as a gardener, that those hard years would still be benefiting me now. Much you don't quite know where the skills that you acquire in life, how they're going to help you. And so, yeah, it's been really good.
That's fantastic. Yeah, because I was going to ask how the translation came in, because when you noted that you're a translator, I just assumed that you grew up bilingual, or had learned it early on. But to come to it at 18, I mean, is a little bit later.
Yes, it was, and it was difficult to start with. But I think I'd always been good. I think being musical, having a musical ear, helps you with languages, to be honest. And I did French at school, and I'd lived in France then for 6 months, so my French was very good. I think listening to the German, listening to sounds, recreating sounds, and I used to read the papers. They had a big sort of tabloid newspaper there. I didn't understand what I was reading, but it gave me a sense of looking at the shape of the language and how sentences or simple grammar was put together. So that was helpful. And gradually over time, I accumulated the vocabulary and was able to then build on those basic building blocks. And yeah, my German, so it became very good. And I'm most grateful that it's sort of, it's great to be able to go to another country and speak a language with the natives. I like that. I think, yeah.
And do you find that it goes in the other direction too, that knowing the German changes the way that you think or speak or write in English? I mean, is there syntax stuff or vocabulary stuff that sort of has changed, the lyricism that you bring to your own use of the language?
That's a good question. I don't think it has, but because it's funny, it's like driving on the left-hand side or the right-hand side of the road. If you go to Europe, somehow there's a switch that always seems to make it possible. So I'm able to separate the languages. But what I do find I do sometimes is I will come out with a German word as I'm speaking English to somebody. If I can't quite think of the noun, whatever it is I'm referring to, it might be bathtub or bathroom, let's say. I'll say, somebody will go, where's the towel? Oh, it's in the Badezimmer or something like that. And they'll go, what? And I haven't realised I've said it. So occasionally that happens. It's maybe to do with fatigue or how much alcohol I've drunk. I don't know. But it's so I'm able to separate the two languages. I mean, when it came to translating the In May, I mean, that was and these musicals I'm doing at the moment, German as the verb sort of comes at the end of the sentence, and you have to read the whole thing to sort of get the sense of that. And it's a great language for having multiple meanings for one word, and you have to sort of be careful in your selection. I mean, maybe we'll talk about this later on, but so it's been a real blessing to be able to have these languages.
I sort of feel like again, part of the reason why I was so excited to talk to you, I feel like you're sort of living like an alternate version of my own timeline that I would have loved to have been on. Because like I started studying German when I was very young in school. They just presented it to us when I was like 9 or 10 years old, and I've lost a lot of it because I haven't kept up with it. But for a long period of time, I was going to enter university and major in German, and thought I was going to be some sort of international business lady, which ended up not happening, which is fine. But part of the reason that I asked about the English was that I found that, especially as a kid, as I I've always been, very verbal and, love to read, but I never understood grammar until I started studying German, because of the way, like you said, the verbs and the tenses and everything shook out. Then I sort of went, oh, that's what a direct object is, like I was able to figure that out. And so now by day I'm a book editor. And so I sort of credit my ability to edit in English back to learning German as a young kid.
It's interesting you say that, because I think I came from it, or came to the language in a completely different way. By mimicry, because I hadn't studied it, or I had no sense. Often I'd find myself repeating phrases from friends. When I was working, I can remember doing it. Digging in the gardens as a landscaper. They'd say something to me which I wouldn't necessarily understand, but I'd just literally repeat the sentence back to them. So it was sort of, rather than approaching it from a grammatical point of view, which I suppose I've done latterly. I think maybe as I've been doing these translations, I've been more conscious of that grammar side. But I think it was just sort of, what's the word? An organic approach to the language. I sort of repeated phrases, sentences, not necessarily really knowing A, how they were constructed, or B, what they meant. And so I sort of done it back to front, perhaps, in a way,
Well, that makes sense, though, as a musician, too. I mean, just learning it by ear and just having the rhythm and sort of the spiciness of the consonants and, in your mouth and stuff, that it to repeat it and to live in those sounds and to live in the rhythm and the feeling of it.
Yeah, it's important that you say rhythm there, because that's a really big thing. I mean, when I get these... I get the piano vocal score through for the shows, and I'll have the CD, sort of pre-recorded CD in German, trying to match up the syllables to the rhythms that are written. It's quite a tricky job, matching them up and getting the sense and making it sound accessible to the listener. I mean, my big thing is you always have to remember who is going to be hearing this in my book. If it's a show, I mean, the one I'm working on at the moment is Bambi. It's the sort of the great story of Bambi. There's a musical version of it in German. I'm translating it into English, but it's going to be an audience of younger children and also adults. So you have to they're going to be hearing it for the very first time on a stage when they go and see it. And it can't be too clever. It can't be too, intellectual or obscure. And I don't mean that in any belittling way, but they're hearing it once. I mean, I've heard it 150 times and bashed out each line so that I think it's right. So I know it inside out, but they don't. So an audience is only hearing these things for the very first time, or they may only ever hear it one time. And so I think you have a duty to try and make it as clear as possible without diminishing the intention or taking away any of the intention of the original author. That's important. Although, I mean, what the show that I did last January, February, March, that took me to Vienna, the composer, when I sort of connected with him, he said, you can be as creative as you want or as interpretive as you want with the lyrics, which is a great gift in a way, because you can then maybe not put a bit more of myself into it, but because it's not me. It's not my work. My translation is my work, but somebody else has written the original words and music, and I do try and make sure I'm faithful to them. So it's not Tim Clarke's piece of, theatre. But it does allow you, being told that you can be, do what you want within reason, gives you a little bit more creative space. And So that was a really nice. The show, by the way, is called A Touch of Colour, and it's a really lovely show, a one-person show. Funnily enough, a bit like In May, it's got a string quartet, guitar, and piano, and the one performer plays 15 different roles. I think it's the story of the one person's life. So so that was nice to have that bit of creative freedom on that. Whereas something like Bambi is going to be, I won't have that same freedom, if you like, and I'll try and be more faithful to the characters that are very well depicted anyway in the script. So I'm learning all the time with every translation I do. I think, why didn't I do that back then with that? So it's a constant process of evolution for me.
Well, so let's use that as the jumping off point to talk a little bit more about In May and about the translation work that you did on that, because I would love to know, as you were saying, you get a little bit of freedom over here on some projects and a little bit more, strict to the original on others, and would love to know where In May fell in that spectrum.
That's a very good question. I've been digging out the script in anticipation of this. I have 1, 2, 3.
Oh my goodness!
4. The list goes on and on.
Lots of drafts.
With, notes on them from. I mean, just to tell you a little bit briefly about the background of In May.
Yes, please.
I mentioned early on I'd gone over to Hamburg to work in the Buddy Holly story, the show in Hamburg in German. The person who invited me over there was a producer called Frank Buchler. I was doing the Buddy Holly story in the West End at the time. He was a German producer looking to bring a show over to Hamburg. So he came to London for 3 days and went to all the shows. The Buddy Holly story was the last show that he saw, and he loved it. So he noticed in my program notes that I'd, put in that I spoke German and French, having lived in both those countries. And he sent a letter then to me and said, look, we're doing a production of the Buddy Holly story in Hamburg. You speak German. Would you like to be in the cast? So that was how my relationship started with Frank. So I've known Frank since 1994, I think.
Wow.
Quite a while now. Yeah, 25 years. And so back we kept in touch, and whenever I went to Europe, I'd sort of, you see him in Berlin and stuff, find out what he was up to. And then he rang me, I think it must have been the end of the 2008, something like that. And I said, look, I've got this show I've written, and it's been translated already, but I want this particular musician as the composer. And that, of course, was Neil Hannon from the Divine Comedy, who Frank was a big fan of his. He said, don't know how to get in touch with him. He's based in the UK. Can you sort it out for me? And I, through my contacts, so in the theatre of music. So I said, yeah, I'm sure I'll be able to do that, Frank. I said, whilst you're at it, send me the copy of the script. I'd be interested to have a look. So he did, and I got in touch with Neil Hannon's manager, and just sent an introductory email saying would Neil be interested in writing the music for a piece of theatre. I had a look at the script, which was it wasn't right. It wasn't quite right, and I said to Frank, I think there could be a better version of this, Frank. I don't think it wasn't technically wrong. It was quite clunky, though, in terms of what I call clunky, or if that's an American word, it was sort of quite. I couldn't see it working too well in a theatrical setting. I think it needed a bit more fluency about it. So he said,
"Well,
as
far as the translation, or as far as the plot, or
no, the translation, the plot. The thing was as it was in German and as it exists now. But that particular translation didn't really work terribly well. So Frank said, would you like to have a go at it? And I said, yeah, of course I'll have a go. So I did. I worked really hard on it and sent it back to him. And he said, I really love this translation. Will you be part of the team? Will you? So I said, yeah, well, of course. By this time, we'd heard back from Neil, who had said, yeah, he'd be interested in having a meeting with us. So I set up a meeting for the three of us then in London. There was a very nice. I don't know if you've ever been, Alison, to London, but the National Theatre is on the south bank of the River Thames, right in the heart of the city. So we set up a meeting there, sitting outside on a beautiful summer's day. And Neil really wanted to check out who we were, and we were desperate for him to say yes, of course. And so we were as nice as we could possibly be. And Frank flew over from Berlin for the meeting. So
Frank had been a fan of Neil's. Like, had you been a fan as well then?
Well, I knew of him because of the hits that he'd had. Sure. I wouldn't say I had any of his albums. To my eternal shame, I didn't have a single Divine Comedy album. I knew National Express, Something for the Weekend. They'd been sort of hits in the UK charts. But when Frank asked me to approach Neil, I thought, well, I better get up to speed on what
who
it
this
is
guy
that
is.
Neil does. So, as I say, to my eternal shame to admit that, but of course, I bought about 10 CDs in one go, and
because by 2008 he had a bunch out.
Yeah, absolutely, and of course was immediately blown away by, wow, this guy is amazing, and there's much more to him than a sort of corny pop hit, National Express. I say corny. I mean, it's a great track of its time, but there's a lot more to him. And so, I was a bit sort of rubbing my hands with glee at the thought of A, meeting him, and B, working with him. So we had the meeting in London, and it just seemed to go really well. And I can remember Neil sort of waved himself off and we said goodbye. And then Frank and I, there's a lovely little pub in Soho called the Lamb and Flag, which is one of the oldest pubs in London. It's hidden away around a tiny little place around the corner. So we had a celebratory drink in the Lamb and Flag that night, which was really lovely. Anyway, so Neil had other projects on, as you would imagine he would do. So we said, look, just do what you can do, and I was sort of fine-tuning the script. I sent him the script. And then one day I sort of got an email saying, oh, I've done four of these things. They're bearing in mind the 20, I think there were 21 or 22 episodes of In May. And so he sent these through and they were great. They sounded fab to me. Even though they were done on computer strings, they were, it still sounded good. And then nothing happened for about a year because he was on tour, he was doing a new album, etc. And then he said, right, I'm clearing my... Frank and I were very careful and cautious about not putting Neil off by constantly hassling it, by saying, oh, wait, we know we need this. We just thought, this is the guy and he'll do it when he's ready. Frank had total faith in Neil. And so Neil then one day said, right, I'm taking 6 weeks off, clearing my desk. It's in May for 6 weeks. And that was it. And yeah, so he did. He came back with all this stuff, great stuff, and which is basically what you hear now on the album. And so I flew over to Dublin twice on 2 separate occasions to work with him, which was absolutely unbelievable for me. Watching somebody like that at close quarters working with him, A, was such an honor, and B, he was unbelievably meticulous, unbelievably precise and detailed about what it was he wanted. And that was a real revelation for me. I mean, you know, I've been an aspiring singer and songwriter as part of my sort of things I do, but I look at that precision and yeah, you go, okay, I can see where I can improve my own working practice. Wow. Not taking the easy chord, the easy root, the easy lyric, whatever. So he was great, and really, really generous with me. That was what I really loved about working with Neil. He, for somebody of his stature within the music business, he didn't know who I was. He just got this translation, but he was totally respectful of the process. You referred to process earlier on, the process of matching my sentences that I'd translated to his melodic lines, melodic phrasing. It often didn't work, so we had to find, I'd literally be sitting there, he'd say, I don't like that, doesn't quite fit, or it sounds a bit heavy, a bit leaden. So then literally I'd have the dictionary there with me and we'd go through it, German-English dictionary, and reconfigure sentences or rework words, and let's try this. This has the same, trying to be true to the meaning of the original German. We didn't want to lose that or the sense of the piece. So it was a real molding of words and phrases to Neil's musical phrases. And that, but he was very, very generous about that, very open with the way he worked with me. And I felt, I think maybe it was really the first sort of theatre thing that he'd done. And I think he perhaps felt a little uncertain and a little reserved himself about doing something that was so far away from his normal, writing songs, going into the studio, recording them, producing an album, and then going on tour to promote the album. I mean, that's what he did and does still. So I think he was perhaps a little uneasy or a little uncertain about the theatre process, but he needn't have worried, because he just has a natural instinct and flair for telling a story. And yeah, so it was an absolute honor working with him and a real learning curve for me. The second time I went, we wanted a German version of it, sung in German, to promote in Germany as well. And so I sang, I sang the German in Neil's studio, and again we had to, because of the way we'd worked on it in the English version, we had to there were times and moments where we had to retranslate back into German and recut the original text, if you like.
Sure.
Which was sort of a bit of a mind-boggling process, because Neil, what we discovered when we were working on the English version, Neil likes rhymes. He likes to put a nice witty rhyme in. I don't mean Moon and June, but just sort of nice to break up, I say, the monotony of, and I don't mean that in a negative way, to break up the almost dialogue that it is. It's sort of sung dialogue in May. Mm-hmm. They're not song lyrics in a sense. It's somebody writing a letter and as you would write a normal letter, but it's sung. So therefore, there's no verse, chorus, bridge, whatever, rhymes. So every now and then, though, Neil would go, "Oh, I think it's time for a little rhyme," which was great. Or he'd repeat. I can't remember which bits. I've written it down somewhere, but as I'm talking, there's a couple of the extracts, a couple of the episodes where he repeats certain phrases. They become almost chorus-like, which weren't there in the original German. So when we recorded the German version with me singing, we had to sort of take all that into account.
Oh, sure.
And also get Frank's permission, because he was the one who'd written it. So it was an amazing process, and I can't tell you how enjoyable it was. Really, it was amazing. It changed actually also in the when we staged dramatic. We've had three productions of it, so we've sort of, there are changes made there as well. And
because I would love to hear more about the stage versions too. I mean, only having ever heard Neil's version, in the recording. I'm just curious about how it works as a staged piece.
Well, I have a friend who is a theatre director here in the northwest of England, and I just approached him and said, "Would you be interested in this? I've got a piece of music." And luckily he was a big fan of Neil's, who isn't, and so he was sort of rubbing his hands with glee. His wife is a performance artist, and and he worked with other people, sort of animators and set designers. So he staged a production of In May at the University Theatre in a place called Lancaster, which was probably about a 300-seat venue, sort of not a traditional theatre space, but almost an experimental theatre space, but quite a big space, which was perfect for In May. And they had a very large backdrop screen with animation that changed depending on the episodes of the with each episode. And his wife played the part of Anna, who is the sort of the main protagonist in the piece. She sang the letters, literally had the letters there, singing them. The string quintet and the piano were on stage with the performer. And it worked well. We had three performances, so not many performances, but we had one in Lancaster, one in Brighton at a festival down there. Brighton is a seaside, an arty sort of seaside town, 40 miles south of London. And also in Glasgow at a place called the Tramway, which is again part of some arts festival they had up there, which went really. So those three performances were really good. Sadly, it didn't sort of. We had great reviews and things, and didn't really develop or catch on. We were hoping that some, so let's say a bigger producer or a tour might take place. It didn't quite work out, and so. In a sense, it's been gathering dust. That it would be my heart's desire to see In May staged. And I think Frank and Neil would probably be would agree with me on this, that if a director sees a way of interpreting it and putting that vision on stage that worked, then please go ahead and do it. The music is so wonderful. The story, as you know, the story of a young musician who is dying, and the letters are these 24 or 20 odd letters to his father who lives in Los Angeles. So it's room for interpretation, for somebody to come in, a director with a vision. I can't see the music being changed in any way, and I think that would take away from the whole thing. But so, yeah, I mean, it would be lovely, Alison, if somebody came along and said, great, I want to take this and do this and do this, that, and the other with it.
Because not knowing anything about like how shows escalate like that when they start small, is that really what it would take? Is just a director or a producer to say like, I want to take this and move it on?
It can work that way, yes. For example, I don't know if you've heard of a show called Everybody's Talking About Jamie. It's no, it started life as a small show in Sheffield, a theatre in Sheffield. It was running for 3 weeks, and sort of word of mouth got round, and a producer from London came up to see it, and she was totally knocked out by this show, and I must take it to London. And she did, and it's become a sort of massive success in the West End and a UK tour and elsewhere. So it does happen that way. I think maybe I'm not a producer, but I have sent the script out and the CD of In May to various people I've thought might be interested in producing a version of it. There's a sort of criticism comes back and says, yeah, it's a lovely piece, but there's not enough dramatic interest in the script to turn it into a play.
What is more dramatic than like a person facing their own mortality? My God.
I know. In a way, I think that's down to their lack of imagination, because it is the. I suppose you could say, well, it starts. We know where it's going to end. He's going to die. But in between that starting point and finding out he's got inoperable cancer and then dying, it's all that emotion that's tied up with it. There's not a plot, there's not a subplot, and I suppose that's where those possibly more commercial type theatres are coming from. That is this going to hold the interest of an audience for Plus the fact it's an hour and 20 minutes, which is a lot less than your standard sort of theatrical offering. So I think something like In May is perfect for theatres up to perhaps 400 or 500 seats maximum. I mean, a lot of the shows I've worked in have been big commercial juggernauts, with where you're playing in theatres 1,200, 1,500, 2,000 seats, even big commercial productions. In May is not that. It's a much more intimate, smaller theatre piece. And I would love for somebody to, maybe somebody's listening to the podcast. And,
let's hope. Where are you? Get in touch with Tim, please, ASAP.
Or get in touch with Alison, please. Yeah, because it's a wonderful piece. And everybody who did come to see it were intensely moved by it. And we had such wonderful emails and sort of letters from people who'd seen it saying this was just so touching. And I've had somebody close to me who died from, in a similar way. And this was such a wonderful thing to hear, with the way the music had presented what was a pretty traumatic experience, if you like, a young person who can't recover from cancer. But I think the interesting thing as well, I don't know if I'm sure you'll have sort of thought this, as the protagonist approaches the end of his life, he sees life around him in all much more vivid colour and detail, and notices small things, the blue eyes of the dog who comes from next door to look at him, and spring is coming, the snow melting, the buds are coming out, there's green everywhere, and there's a sort of sense, a bizarre sense of vitality as his body is giving up on him. There's this sense of life going on and blooming around him. And
well, it's, my favorite piece, this February 6th, where he says, my life is to be rather short, but at least I'm still living it every hour, every minute. It chills me. I love it.
Absolutely, and I would totally agree with you. February the 7th. You've just got the bare chords and there's a crack in Neil's voice as he's singing it, and the heart-rending lyrics. I've just got them up here if I can find them. February the 7th. There's still, dear Father, there's still snow on the ground, but there's sunshine every day. It cheers me up. I was right. Dr. Eisenstein says that nothing more can be done. We're stopping the treatment. Relief. I don't have to hope anymore. I won't be in any pain. No one knows for sure how long I've got left, but I think it will be enough. So that's it. My life is to be rather short, but at least I'm still living it. Every minute of every hour, every day that I wake, I am happy. Your son. And that every minute of every hour of every day that I'm awake, it just gets me, cracks me up. So there's bits throughout this piece of In May that just touched me, and I'm sure have touched you, and touched those people who listen to it. So throughout the piece, I think, like you, I think there's wonderful. Somebody with the right sense of imagination could really do a fantastic directorial job on this show. And of course, Neil's music just enhances and echoes all those sentiments in the script, heightens all those emotions. And so for me, it's a really lovely piece.
And it's just stunning. I hadn't, known anything about it. I'd known, that Neil had worked on the Amazons and Swallows piece, and had known that he had done some of this theatrical stuff. But prior to when Foreverland came out, and then this came out as the bonus disc, I remember it took me months to even listen to it, because I was like, I listened to Foreverland and really enjoyed it. And then I'll never forget that there was one day that I live in Chicago and was commuting to my office. I have a good, half an hour, 40-minute commute, and it was raining really hard that day. And the trains were all backed up and they were packed. And I was sitting all crammed in my seat on the train, and I had my headphones on. I always listen to music, and was listening to this piece, and was just, my breath was completely taken away, because I was so transported by the music. And it was beautiful that I had the time to really listen to the whole thing, I was blessed that the train was running so slow, because I was able to listen to the whole piece sort of almost in its entirety. And then just was obsessed with it after that. For just months and months and months, it was all I wanted to listen to. And it just seems like a piece that would have been so special to work on, as far as, the music, and it sounds like, that you had this protracted sort of period of creation between, the translation in German, and then the first English translation, and then your gloss on the translation, and then adding the music, and then changing it with Neil. And to live in that world that it created, it seems like the piece has its own sort of life force to it that kind of wanted to be born,
That's a very good way of putting it, Alison. It did, and it was such a long, slow burn. Often, as you'll know yourself, these creative ideas come and then get shelved or sidetracked, or artists become sidetracked. And so often creative projects do take years. The gestation period can be quite a long one. I think, you think of West Side Story. I think it was sort of first mooted in 1947 or something, and didn't get on stage till 1959. And I'm not comparing In May with West Side Story, but it was a slow burn with In May, but it wasn't going to be stopped. I think you're right. It had its own sort of, and the reason I say that, I think because the three, I mean, Frank and Neil and me, I suppose, we had a real belief in it, and still do. You know, that it's a great and original piece of music theatre, if you want to call it that. And I think it's still actually waiting for the right director or right production to come along to sort of give it to a wider audience. Which it's interesting. You say you listen to it a lot. Did you? How did it affect you? Did you find yourself crying or laughing, or were you just absorbed in the overall thing? How did it work for you, Alison?
I mean, it was such a perfect combination of factors, because you know, like I said, I'd been a fan of Neil's for a very long time, and so, you know, his music is very close to my heart. And then I've, you know, lived through a lot of death at sort of a young age. My mother passed when I was 8, and then her mother, my grandmother, I lived with her as she passed. I had just graduated from college, and so I was maybe 22, 23 when I sort of lived with her and was there with her when she died. And then my father passed when I was in my early 30s and was there when he died. And so death is sort of omnipresent with me, you know, not in a not in a bleak way, but in a way where I because of those early experiences, I had a lot of friends who, as they were going through their first deaths in their life, you know, I felt sort of like the mother hen who was sort of saying, like, yeah, I've been through this. Like, I can support you and talk to you and sort of level with you in a way where I don't get scared when people are talking about death. I don't get freaked out. And so with all those memories, then it the piece just felt so real and so honest in that it wasn't just like a downward trajectory, where it wasn't just like, I found out that I have terminal cancer. How depressing. I'm going to die. This sucks. You know, that there is the unfolding of the joy and the life.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting, that, isn't it? I mean, the way you've just described that very succinctly there, it's sort of, I've got terminal cancer, downhill, depression, life sucks, I die. You know, it's not like that at all, is it, In May? It's much more, as you say, very life affirming, life goes on. And I think for me, those are the sort of lump in throat bits in the pieces when he's sort of he's living with this hope. And I think that's part of the human condition, that we all hope. It's who we are as a race, I think, as a mankind. You know, that the hope that something's better around the corner. You know, I mean, you talk about, you know, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, you know, A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, living in a gulag in Siberia. You know, it's a good day if he gets a bit more potato, or, you know, it's not quite as cold. You know, there's that hope that things are going to get better. And sort of that, when he realizes halfway through the piece, you know, there's that extinguishing of hope, you know. Well, it's that 7th of February episode that we both mentioned, you know, we're stopping the treatment, nothing more can be done. I don't have to hope anymore. And so there's that acceptance of his condition. There's acceptance, okay. Do you know what? I'm going to die, but that's okay. I can deal with that. And because that hope is an eternal thing in us. And I suppose saying that to yourself, hearing it from the doctor, Eisenstein, you know, can't do anything more. So it's quite that's quite a moment for me, you know, and I always get that lump in the throat there. And
it's such a beautiful line, though, because I also think that a lot of times when when folks are terminal or they have family members who are terminal, there becomes this performative aspect that you have to do for other people, other people who are like, how's everything going? Is there anything I can do to help? And they don't actually want to do anything to help. And so to have that relief of not having to perform for other people's comfort, your distress. And so, I really love that line too, that that I don't have to hope anymore.
That's right. And I think also his partner, who we never meet, but Anna, his girlfriend, who he's sent away, she never actually comes. He doesn't want her to come. It's a process that he wants to go through, the dying process, on his own, isn't it? I mean, maybe he doesn't want her to see him like this. Or it's a process that he just wants to go through by himself.
But then that's the punchline, is that as performed, it's meant to be sung by her, correct?
Well, yes and no. It's interesting you mentioned that. I mean, that was the approach. That's where it's, in a way, so flexible. I mean, we did talk about the father singing those parts. He's reading the letters or emails or whatever as he receives them. And it might be the stage that it's the father sort of sitting there with his young wife and young child Lou in Los Angeles on a brilliant summer's day, reading these emails. Or maybe it's the man himself, the protagonist himself, who's reading these out as he's writing them and living the moments. I think the original thing, you're quite right, was Anna. I think what Frank, the bootler, the creator, originally envisaged was that Anna would sing these parts or sing the episodes, and that there would be a dancer. He wanted a sort of ballet dancer or a contemporary dancer to represent some of the emotions in another form, to have a bit of more sort of theatrical depth, if you like, to it. And that I think it's all flexible, it's all doable, or it's all removable. And I think that's what I said earlier on. If it's somebody with some vision and an idea of how this can work, bring the characters in, bring the father in, maybe. Who knows?
Bring the Weimaraner in.
Never work with dogs or children or animals. So that's the beauty of the piece, I think, that you have this sort of flexibility of approach. But I mean, the other bit that gets me, Alison, is the end. Calling you Anna now. The other bit that gets me is at the end when he dies on the 31st of December. And he doesn't. I'm rubbish. He dies on the 31st of May. And it's such a lovely musical setting. My dear father, it's early in the morning. I feel totally at peace. I'm not in any pain. In fact, I'm happy. I have all your photographs arranged around the sofa, in a great big semicircle on the floor. I'm sitting upright, looking out into the garden. It's bathed in sunlight. I feel very close to you all. I'm with you, Father, and everything is joy. Everything is joy. Anna's coming, and May is taking its leave. Adieu. Adieu, as always, with love, your son. Now, the way Neil sings that last line, one of Neil's characteristics is he likes holding long notes on.
Yes.
And he's sort of rather proud of that. And he does it here at the end. Adieu, adieu, as always, with love. And then he goes up this perfect fifth. Your son. that I can't sit there without crying. When I hear this long sustained, right at the limit of his vocal range, in full voice vocal range, and it's like this cry, this plea, but it's also a sort of, this is the last word I'm ever going to say. Your son. And it just holds it and holds it and holds it, and then you just get the crashing piano chord at the end, a bit like the what's the Beatles song, "A Day in the Life," is it? Where you get the crashing piano chord that's held for about 2 minutes. They keep the sustain pedal down on the piano, and it just crashes. And it's a bit like this here with Neil. Your son, you hear the piano go down, and it just resonates until it fades away into nothing. And that, so that's another sort of hairs on the back of your head moment, you know, when the tears come and the lump in the throat comes. It's just great.
Yeah, it's the completeness of the piece. I mean, that's part of its beauty, I think, too, is the very discreet, you know, I just love the conceit of these letters, you know, and the songs and the pieces going by day, and that it just gives you this very, very specific little chunk of time. And and again, it just seems so purely theatrical, you know, to say like, here is this limit, you know, like a beautiful haiku, you know, like what can you cram in the small limits of just, you know, these few songs, these few months, and just the journey that emotionally that it goes on. I think that's part of its power.
Yes, I agree with you. It's a very good way of putting it. And I would also say, and you being a big fan of Neil, I mean, his writing is inherently theatrical. I mean, the characters that he creates in his works throughout, from beginning to present day, I mean, characters and images, you see the stories unfolding in his songs. And I think in your article you said something very prescient about I've got it here. Hang on. The strengths that I don't think Neil Hannon even realizes he has. And I think you're right there. It's his ability to craft these intensely personal, intimate, honest, unadorned moments that has fueled my love of his music for close to 20 years. And I think you're absolutely right there, Alison. He was commissioned to write for the Royal Opera House. They had a series of commissions they were giving to composers who'd never written operatic pieces before. And he was asked to do one, sort of short, 20 minutes, half-hour operatic pieces with a limited budget, but staged in the Linbury Theatre, which is the small theatre attached to the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden in London. Excuse me. And Neil wrote a piece called Sebastopol, about the siege of Sebastopol. And by his own admission, he felt it didn't work, I think, because he tried to adhere to a particular genre of how he thought musical theatre should be written. You know, it was a bit sort of a mini version of Les Mis. And I think you're right. I don't think he quite realised what his own natural inherent skill set is, and I think that was. I mean, I'm not giving away any being indiscreet here. I mean, he talked about this to me when we met some time after, but I think he felt it didn't work as well as it should have done because he'd been sort of trying to write to a certain style rather than something like In May, which, as you said, he had the freedom to just be himself, and that's why it worked so well, I think.
So did you know that he was going to record the whole piece himself at a certain point? Was that?
Yes. Yes, he recorded some of it when I was there. In fact, I think you've got me here again. I think in that very first session, first time I went to Dublin, I think he recorded it all then. All then with me. in a sense, I suppose what you get on the CD is almost a very good demo.
Wow.
He recorded the vocals. Let me get this absolutely right. The string sections, he recorded on his computer in Dublin on string. There were computer strings. The vocal, he sang the vocal to that when I was there. Then he hired Conch Studios in London. I don't know if you've ever heard of Conch Studios. It's owned by the Kinks, who are a very famous band, the Kinks.
Sure.
In North London, Ray Davis and co. And they owned a studio called Conch Studios in North London. And Neil put together the string quintet and the pianist in the studio at Conch Studios. I think he was there for 2 days of recording. Frank came over from Berlin and I came down from Manchester to sit in for one of the days. And that was amazing. He used the vocals of the recording in Dublin and put them on top of the string recordings in Conch.
Wow.
Yeah, so he matched them up. What was amazing about seeing that process take place was, again, his precision with working with the musicians. These were top session musicians he'd worked with or he knew, but he was a hard taskmaster with them. And brilliant. He was fantastic to watch him working. And he had a light touch. He never got really angry with anybody, but he knows exactly how it should sound, what he wants. And that was, again, a revelation, watching him be totally in control with those people. So that was amazing. Actually, the day before Conch, he'd had a rehearsal in London. I went to the afternoon rehearsal with those musicians in a rehearsal studio to get it right and sort of iron bits out. And then went into the studio the following day and did it. And yeah, it was amazing. So he matched the Dublin lyrics. I think from what I could gather from his manager, Natalie, who's a very nice lady, that at some point he would like to maybe re-record the vocals in a sort of, I don't know, better way or more, I don't know, or redo them. But whether that will actually ever happen, because the current version is really nice. I mean, really well done. And so I don't know. It was a real joy when it came out as the bonus disc on Foreverland. That was fantastic I think that was released in 2016, September 2016. And I can remember going to the shop, the music store. I was on tour with a show at the time, Sister Act. I don't know if you know the show Sister Act.
I haven't seen it, but yeah, I know of it, yeah.
Yeah, I was playing the priest, Monsignor O'Hara in Sister Act. Great role. And I was up in the northeast of England, a place called Sunderland, which is a sort of post-industrial city up in the northeast of England, not too far from Scotland. And I was waiting for the release date, and there's the HMV, His Majesty's Voice music stores in the UK. I knew it was coming out on the Tuesday, the 26th of September or something. And going into HMV's store in Sunderland, buying 4 copies of my own.
Oh, I was going to say, come on, how come you didn't get any free copies?
I think it was the joy of going into the store.
Sure.
You know, that was so exciting. I did get some free copies subsequently.
Good.
But I can't knock Neil or Natalie, his manager. So I did get some free copies. Yeah. So the whole In May experience was a thoroughly amazing one. I'm watching Neil work and, watching the theatre production get put into place, and it's just sort of been, I say, sitting there. Life takes over, other things take over. Neil's got other albums, other shows to do, and I think he's writing a musical of some sort at the moment. I haven't been in touch with him for quite a while, sadly. I mean, we're just, I've been doing one thing and he's been doing another. But it would be really nice to really get the ball rolling on In May again. And maybe, Alison, doing this podcast, which I'm very grateful for you doing, maybe this is the kick that ball needs to get rolling again.
Something in the ether. Let's just get something going, spark some energy. Well, and I think there's a hunger for it too, because this is by far one of the most highly trafficked blog posts that I get on my blog. I mean, I write about music, a fair bit. Out of my own love for music and being a musician.
Yeah.
But as far as search results and random hits and times that this has been reposted on various music forums, like I don't know if you know the Steve Hoffman audiophile forum online.
No.
I think it's mostly for a lot of it's for like people who really get into like really hi-fi stereo equipment. But okay. I think then they also talk a lot about, different remastered versions, like, oh, get this version of the remastered Joshua Tree, not this other one. And somebody on there was doing a whole piece on the Divine Comedy and linked to this piece. And so it gets a lot of traffic. And so, good. And I don't think that's anything down to me, but I think that's just, there's a hunger for this piece and for the beauty of it. And just for someone to sort of, like you say, take Neil as seriously as he should be taken, because I think that, his work is so gorgeous, and there's a difference in his perception in the UK versus the US, because we didn't have the big, corny, cheesy pop hits. We didn't get National Express over here, and we didn't get Something for the Weekend over here. And so I think for myself and other American Divine Comedy fans, we just know the albums in total. And so to us, he's the Beatles. He's, any of these, he's Bowie, as far as being a thoroughly, album oriented, really genius kind of composer. And so I think that there's a hunger for people to see that recognized, especially among his fans. And so I think that's why it gets a lot of traffic.
Well, that's amazing you say that, because I think if those fans could discover In May, you think of all those tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions maybe, and they knew there was a theatrical production of Neil Hannon's In May on. I mean, from a commercial perspective, I'm sure it would do extremely well. Never mind, just because it's Neil, and then when they would get into the theatre and be immersed in this warm bath, strings and vocal and emotion, it would be a double whammy, an absolutely amazing experience for somebody to experience live.
I totally agree. I hope it happens.
Well,
So Tim, tell us what's next for you. What's up on your docket? I mean, now that we're all sort of slowly emerging from the pandemic time.
Well, I have this new translation of Bambi to do, which I think I mentioned earlier on. That's it at the moment, Alison. That will take me probably till, I don't know, the end of maybe the middle of August to do that. One of the shows, A Touch of Colour, that I mentioned to you earlier, which was one of the translations I did back in February and March last year, that's getting some interest from various quarters. So when things open up again in terms of travel, I might have to go over to Berlin to sort of liaise with the producer, Bettina, over there, and just also to touch base with her and sort of have some human contact instead of via email. So other than that, I mean, as a jobbing actor as well, I've had, bits and bobs, let me say, bits and bobs coming in. I've done some voiceovers for some training films, which are quite dull in terms of creativity and content. But I have to pay the bills somehow, and I've just done quite a big section over the last couple of months. Not all the time. I mean, I have a little voice studio here, and I do those. I get the scripts through and do those. They pay okay. They keep the money ticking over. One thing I haven't mentioned, which alongside all my sort of theatrical and musical endeavors, I did my last big show in summer of 2018, as I said, the Glenn Miller story in the West End in London. And I was getting to an age where I thought, do I really want to be, going on tour again, a big tour? Because my partying days away on tour are behind me. Much as I enjoyed it back in the day, I'd rather sort of have a small beer and go to bed with my book, rather than partying, much as I love performing. So I've been thinking about ways forward, and I've spent the last 3 years retraining as an integrative psychotherapist and counsellor.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, it has been a real challenge. It's only been 1 day a week at university, but it's enabled me to carry on with my other sort of creative endeavours and the translations. So I've literally just completed that at the end of May.
Congratulations. Oh my gosh.
So
that's huge.
That's been, and I'm sort of, that's been a real challenge for me. A different demand on me academically, and but I've always been curious about life, and I think you don't just stop or become one thing. And as soon as you stop asking questions or looking for interesting things or following passions, then you may as well give up, That's my view. So I feel really lucky that I have the translations, the musical theatre translations, and I've sort of got enough money just to keep going. I've hardly touched my piano for I can't tell you how long, and my saxophone and clarinet sit there in the corner of the room sort of winking at me saying, play me. So there's those areas I need to get back on the horse there just for my own enjoyment. And I'm always, I'm featured at the moment in a television commercial in the UK, a national TV ad. Yeah, it paid well. So that's been on quite a lot. So that's the life of a jobbing actor, and that's the reality of it, which I accept and I'm fine with. I mean, obviously when I started off, you want to be a star, you want to be this, that and the other, and I mean, when you get to that, it's a bit like in May. There's no more hope. I'm not going to be the next John Travolta or whoever, or Tom Cruise, which is fine. That hope sort of remodels itself into pragmatism, and okay, what is it I want? And because you can end up, I find, especially in the performing arts world, sort of where you're constantly allowing yourself to be judged by other people, auditions or gigs even. There's always an audience passing a judgment on you, when in fact you can't really let that sort of validate who you are. It's sort of, it has to come from inside a bit, and that's where how do I value? I'm talking like a counsellor now, but interestingly, I think the having studied this, counselling and psychotherapy for these last 3 years, I think it will inform my own creative work in a way, because one of the big things they sort of focus on is your own being truthful. Being a genuine you. Carl Rogers. The sort of being genuine. What is the genuine you? Because we have so many multiple personas that we adopt for different people, and or if we're going into an audition process, well, all upbeat and happy and high, and selling ourselves, and the exhaustion that comes after that, the sort of deflation, and being constant despite all of those things. What's the genuine you inside? Being true to yourself, and treating, if you like, as Kipling said, triumph and disaster, treating those two imposters the same, being steady. So getting to that point, I think I've lost myself in that semi-philosophical rant now. But you know what I mean? Sort of being genuine to who, so informing my own work. I think if I do I haven't written any songs for quite a long time, and that's something I'd like to get back to.
I love Stronger Now. I mean, like, that is a classic tune. Like, as soon as you sent that over, I was like, I was all of your stuff. I love your voice and your melodic sense and your playing and everything is fantastic. You were, I was a little bit nervous. We were like, well, this isn't as good as Neil Hannon, but I listened to it. I was like, damn, this stuff is really good. I love your pieces.
I've known love, I've known pain, I've had riches and thrown it all away. I've been high, so high, then so low, so low. Yes,
we'll see how it comes out, and I have an idea for a musical, an adaptation of a story that I think would go really well. That's sort of bubbling away in because doing all the writing, doing the translation, they're not my words. I'm sort of shaping them into an English presentation, if you like. And so part of me always thinks, well, come on, Tim, you're there, you're sort of critical of things that you think aren't very good, writing or plays that I might have seen. Put your money where your mouth is. Why don't you take 6 months and say, okay, or 3 months, okay, if you think you can do better, it's no good talking about it or, procrastinating. Do it. See. So that is something that weighs on me, and I feel, as I said earlier, I like challenges in life. I think life is an interesting quest. It's an adventure, and that's something I'd like to do with this story. I'd like to adapt for the stage. So that's definitely on my list of things to do sooner rather than later. Also, part of me, Alison, is sort of, I have to say, by the way, I know this isn't a mutual love fest, it shouldn't become one, but your prose is incredibly accessible and beautifully crafted, which is what attracted me to the article you wrote about In May. It was real precision, real insight. You'd done your research and you knew what you were talking about, and you presented it in a very coherent and excellent way. So that's my praise to you.
Thank you so much for saying that. That really means a lot.
You got what it was about, and you got the spirit behind it. You got who Neil is, and yeah, it was really good.
Well, Tim, I thank you so much for being willing to chat with me for this whole length of time, and go so deep into this, the process of how you created this amazing piece. Is there anything that you would like to sign off with? Tell people where to find you in the world, or tell people if they need some therapy, where to come and find you?
Here in England, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I just, what can I sign off with? Well, yeah, sign up. I mean, if people listen to this and do want to contact me at all, my email address is Tim Clarke Music. That's all one word, Clarke with an E. So Tim Clarke Music at hotmail.co.uk. And if you'd like to ask me anything or find out anything about In May or anything else, please get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. I suppose I would just say generally to people listening, if you're into the creative world, keep an open mind. You never know what's around the corner. And practice. I say this to students I've had in the past, sort of practice your talents hard. You never know when those talents and skills are going to come in handy. So the creative arts world is a fantastic world to be in. You won't necessarily get rich, but you can have a really interesting and varied life, which I've been lucky enough to have. I've done some great things, and I've had some times where it's been tough. So, but that's all sort of shapes the person you are and who you become. And I suppose finally, and if anybody wants to listen to any of my music, please get in touch. But finally,
and I'll be sure to link to your website with all your clips in the show notes too. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. But I was going to say finally, I suppose I'd just like to say thank you to you, Alison, for hosting this and for listening to me babble on for nearly 2 hours and or however long it's been. It's been really great, and thank you for showing such an interest in May, and good luck with all your future projects and work.
Thank you so much, Tim. This has been a joy.
Oh Lord, but I feel stronger now. I know who I am. I feel stronger now. Doing the best I can. I feel stronger now. Getting stronger every day. I feel stronger now. Everything's gonna be okay.
You were just listening to a portion of Tim's fantastic song, Stronger Now. You can find the whole thing on his SoundCloud page, just soundcloud.com/Tim Clarke Music. Well, as you can probably tell, Tim and I got on like a house on fire and probably could have easily gone on for another hour or two. Hopefully I can convince him to come back and record another episode with me sometime soon. If you've not had the pleasure of listening to In May yet, please do seek it out. It's definitely still available on Apple Music as part of the expanded edition of Foreverland, and the online store for the Divine Comedy still has copies of the CD as well. And of course, be sure to find Tim online too. His main website is timclarkemusic.com. That's Clarke with an E. And you can find all sorts of info there about his career, as well as links to his own wonderful music. As always, you can find notes and annotations from this episode on my own website, queenofpeaches.com. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.